This is what we bring to you from the House of Consciousness Information, where we document our stories live on videotape, 125th Street. See? Have no respect for the black man on the 125th Street. See what I'm saying, brother? That's what we talking about. Black woman, you gonna walk right by. No respect for the black man. See?
Brothers and sisters. Brother, do I have your permission to speak? Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here tonight. I'm grateful to the good life. I last spoke here about last February. And I did a talk then at that time called Great African Historians. As a matter of fact, let me just mention the materials that are over here. First of all, this book, which just came out, I got copies of it yesterday. It is called Egypt, Child of Africa. Now, we spend a lot of time with Egypt, but we aren't overindulging ourselves. We have a lot of documentation for Egypt, or that's the country it's called today. It used to be known as Kemet, the Black Land. This is a tough, tough book. And it is probably the last book that Ivan will edit by himself for 3 or 4 years. The next book that will come out is a book that I'm editing. It will be a revised and expanded edition of the African presence in Asia. Let me just, since I just got it, let me just tell you what the first part of this book contains. First of all, there's a tribute to a departed scholar. That's my article, right? That's the first one. I have 5 pieces in here. And this is a tribute to Dr. Chancellor James Williams, author of Destruction of Black Civilizations. I don't know how many of you know about Dr. Williams. He was born the son of a slave. His mother was a cook, a nurse, and an evangelist. He was born in Bennettsville, South Carolina, about 1895. He moved to Washington, D.C., where he lived for about 70 years. He met William Leo Hansberry, and there's an appendix on Hansberry. We also have an article, tough piece, strong piece, new pieces here, called Nile Genesis, Continuity of Culture from the Great Lakes to the Delta. That's by Charles Finch. The Racial Identity of Ancient Egyptian Populations from an Analysis of Physical Remains. This is by a brother named Keith Crawford, who lives in the Washington, D.C. area, who has actually had an opportunity to physically examine the bones, the skeletal remains of even pre-dynastic Egyptians. The next piece, very strong piece, called Black Land of Antiquity, A Brief Historical Outline of Dynastic Kemet. That's by yours truly. That's dedicated to Dr. Ben. If I do say so myself, at the risk of sounding very subjective, it's one of the very best articles in the book. Followed by another one by yours truly, called I'm in a Very Good Mood, From the Center to the Fringe, The Persistence of Racial Myths and Physical Anthropological Theory. This deals with all the names that have been heaped on black people, names like Mediterraneans, like Hamites, like members of the brown race. These are terms that came into use particularly in the 19th century when it began to be very obvious how important Egypt actually was. It was at this time that Egypt was artificially removed from Africa and placed in that nebulous spot that we all know about called the Near East or the Middle East. Up until that point, most people had no problem with the fact that Egypt was in Africa. But after Napoleon came to Egypt with his 175 scientists and engineers, and they really began to find out what the people of Egypt had done, and this is during the height of the slave experience, you had to take Egypt out of Africa. Because it was important to convince you and me that we had only been fit to work for other people. You could not justify the enslavement of African people and at the same time point to the glories of ancient Egypt. So the ancient Egyptians became white people. They moved from black to brown to white. That deals with that. You also have a very, very important piece called The Myth of the Mediterranean Race by an African sister named Dana Reynolds Marniche. One of our greatest scholars comes next. That piece is called Bringing Ma'at, Destroying Isfet, the African and African Diasporan Presence in the State of Ancient Kemet. That's Asa Hilliard. Followed by another sister's article called The Sixth Napatan Dynasty of Kush. This deals with civilization just to the south of Egypt. In fact, we probably should not talk about Egypt in isolation. We should probably talk most of the time about Nile Valley civilizations, because when we do that, then we don't isolate Kemet. We don't isolate Egypt from the rest of the continent. I even have problems with the title of this book, Egypt, the Child of Africa. Egypt was an intrinsic part of Africa. There's no separation. There are three other pieces in the main part. The first is called The Problem of the Bernal Davidson School. This is by a young art historian named Manu Ampim. What Manu does is rake Basil Davidson and Martin Bernal over the coals. He feels that these are two white men who have more or less gotten in on the African-centric movement, Martin Bernal in particular, and he takes them to task. He has a much more sound article that deals with modern forgeries of the Cairo Museum. Certain pieces that you see, for example, that bust of Nefertiti, a few other pieces that may look like Europeans, he calls them forgeries, and he documents those. And last but not least, in this section, there's an article called 7 times 7, the 7 Hermetic Principles of Ancient Egypt. In the other part of the book, there are book reviews. My own book is reviewed. There's an article called The Royal Ships of the Pharaohs. There's an article on the oldest preserved mummy. There's an article on the oldest known paved road on Earth. There's an article on the first human skull in existence. There are articles, there are articles, there are articles. It's a hot book. I have a few copies of them. I just got it yesterday, and I would be happy to autograph it for you. There are also a series of audio and video tapes. The videotapes include African contributions to the world, a very round approach. That is a lecture and slide presentation. It includes the Moors of Antiquity, a very comprehensive presentation on the black people who civilized Europe during the Middle Ages, who brought Europe out of their decadence for the second or third time. You also have African women in antiquity, another piece that Jamal did called The Rape of Africa, that deals with the invaders of Africa, who they are. And notice I said who they are. The Arabs, the white folks in South Africa, what they did, how they got there, what our relationship to them is, and last but not least, great African historians. And then you have a series of audio tapes. I take the time to promote that because I want you to understand that this is a collective thing. I am honored to get up here and speak before you. It is a pleasure and a privilege to talk about our glorious past. But we do not do this in isolation. It is important to understand that if this work is to continue, it must be based on all of your support. So when you buy a book, when you buy a tape, you can feel, and it is accurate to say that you are making a significant contribution. We all have a job to do. Not everybody can do everything. But collectively, we can do it all, because that's what it's going to take. I want to help destroy the notion of this rugged individualism. That's something I have to fight within myself, that we have to subordinate our own individual needs and desires for the good of the collective. If we don't do that, we're not going to make it. And our issue of survival is very much in doubt. In fact, I would like to go beyond the question of mere survival. I want black people to prosper and grow. We have been on the verge, we have been surviving for a long time. That's not enough. You start from there, but where do we go from there? Those are the materials that are available. I encourage you to pick up one of them. It's all very solid information. The quality, technically, content-wise, is very, very good. I want to thank my friend and colleague and brother, Jamal Gorey. I want to thank all the staff at The Good Life and all the brothers and sisters for coming out tonight. I do appreciate it. Everybody with me so far? I'll be speaking tomorrow for Perspective Open Awareness in Pasadena at 2045 South Fair Oaks at about 4 o'clock. It's myself and Brother Mathu Atur, and there we'll be talking about a tribute to the ancestors. We'll be talking about those African men and women who have chronicled this history, beginning with the fiery David Walker in 1830. You know, even Frederick Douglass was something of an Egyptologist. In 1866 or 1870, something to that effect. I was just reading this yesterday. Frederick Douglass did an address before a group of folks where he affirmed that the ancient Egyptians were black people. Problem is, during the 19th century, a lot of us associated Egypt with that wicked, evil Pharaoh. Okay? So we kind of disassociated Egypt, and we had an ambivalent attitude about it. But you also have black folks like Martin Delany, you know, who named his children after African pharaohs, who was a Pan-Africanist, a captain in the Civil War, first black person to go to Harvard Medical School, a staunch Pan-Africanist and an early Egyptologist. You have Edward Wilmot Blyden, the person that popularized the expression Africa for the Africans. You have people like Rufus Lewis Perry. You have a brother named Edward Johnson, who 145 years ago in Philadelphia was doing sophisticated lectures, yes, sophisticated lectures on the African origin of ancient Egypt. And we take that up until the 20th century with people like J.A. Rogers. We look at the historical emphasis placed by Marcus Garvey. Do you know that Marcus Garvey in 1920 went to Harvard University and lectured before a group of people called the Nile Club, N-I-L-E. Now, who in the world were the Nile Club? And what were they doing at Harvard University? And what did Marcus Garvey tell them in 1920? Now, that's deep, and it's an inspiration. And it makes you very humble because it makes you realize that what we're doing, although it's exciting, is not new. And what we're doing is carrying on a sacred mission. You understand that, don't you? That this is a sacred mission. This is not anything to take lightly. This is something that we are trying to use to rehabilitate our lives and our people. Our history is our badge of honor. And all strong people emphasize their history all the time. Weak people do not. And this is a time when we must be very strong. With AIDS, with crack, with Newt Gingrich, with Uncle Bill Clinton, and all of those folks who do not have our interests at heart, this is a time we must be very, very, very strong. We talk about that tomorrow. And then last but not least, let me also mention that on January the 8th, although it's a couple weeks away, I'll be doing a talk, and Brother Red can comment on this if he likes, at Marcus Garvey School. It's actually the Church of Amun-Ra. Dr. Palmer called me this morning right after I got home and got in bed and was trying to go to sleep. Brother called me and says, brother, you need to talk about the church. There is a church. Brother Red, you want to mention it? Just briefly. There is a church at Garvey School. I believe it starts at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, so you ought to go and check it out. If you want to hear Christianity slammed real hard, you will enjoy yourself. It is not dull. It deals with things from a historical analysis, and you ought to be there. I'll be giving a lecture on Africans in Asia on January the 8th at 1 o'clock. There's no admission charge. I'd like for you to come. Today, or tonight I should say, we are supposed to talk about a very serious question. I was approached by a publication called Image Magazine, a new magazine. I don't know if you've seen it or not. Just came out about 2 months ago. I think it's subtitled Empowering the Black Man. They called me out of the clear blue. Can everybody hear me so far? Yeah. Am I talking too loud? I know I'm talking fast because I'm very pumped up. Jamal, can you do anything about that? You're the man for all seasons, brother. I know you can do it.
I got some standing too. All right, let's see what we got. Go ahead.
How's that? Is that any better?
Yes.
Wonderful? Good. As long as you're happy. There's also some sisters standing. If we could do something about that. Even though they might have come late. They asked me to write an article of about 3,000 words, and I love to write. I love to sit in front of my computer, my word processor, in my study, like a monk in a monastery, and compose script about our people. And this subject matter was a little bit odd, though, but they wanted to pay me a decent amount of money, and it was something different. They wanted me to address the issue that all of us, I'm sure, have thought about at one time or another. Are white people inherently evil? Are white people inherently evil? That's very thought-provoking. That's very provocative. And they wanted me to base it on unfavorable white-black relationships. That was not hard for me to do, because all the historical white-black relationships that I have found have been unfavorable all the white-black relationships that I have identified have been unfavorable for black people, with no exceptions. They wanted me to write it in a personalized manner, not real academic, and they wanted me to deal with some subject matters or areas that are not normally dealt with. Most of us know about the slave experience. We know about all those black people. And notice I said black people, not slaves, because slaves were not brought from Africa. Africans were brought from Africa, and they were enslaved on the way over here. Slaves did not come from Africa. Africans came from Africa. Look at it from a different perspective. We know something about that, how we were snatched up, chained, and shackled, and marched to slave fortresses on the west coast of Africa, and in human conditions, and put on those ships and brought over here. We know about how a lot of folks jumped overboard, how sometimes a mother would throw her child overboard to the sharks so that he would not have that slave experience. We know about the colonization and the rape of Africa. We know about black populations in places like Brazil and the Caribbean, although we need to have a re-examination of those. But there are certain other areas that deal with unfavorable white-black relationships in terms of groups or collectives that we have not effectively examined, and I'm going to look at 3 of those tonight. The way we're going to do this, in the course of about an hour and a half, maybe not even that long, is I'm going to go over this paper. I'm going to summarize it, and then we're going to take a brief break, just as brief as possible, 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to set up a slide projector, and I'm going to illustrate the rest of this with a series of slides, and then we're going to have a summary. Is that okay? Very good. Are white people inherently evil? Are they, by their very nature, racist? No. At least I don't believe them to be. Now, I am not speaking for popularity, right? Because a lot of people do believe that, and there may be something to it. But what I'm going to do is present some information, and you can draw your own conclusions. I'm looking at this from the perspective of a historian. That is my discipline. As a historian, however, it is exceptionally clear to me. Yeah, it may be, man. Hey. And probably obvious to the entire world that white people generally possess an extremely brutal record vis-a-vis black people. The European role in the transatlantic slave trade and the rape and subjugation of Africa are themselves clear, damning, and execrable demonstrations of white brutality and hostility towards blacks. Obviously, though, white-black relationships have not been confined to Africa and the Western Hemisphere. We supplement our knowledge here, therefore, in this brief survey of unfavorable white-black relationships by examining 3 very important geographic regions of the world that frequently escape the attention of African Americans or Africans living in America. That is India, Australia, and Tasmania. We begin with India. Now, we now know, based on recent scientific studies of DNA, that modern humanity originated in Africa, that black people are the world's original people, and that all modern humans can ultimately trace their ancestral roots back to Africa. Everybody knows that, correct? There should be no doubt about those 3 things. Not only are black people the world's original people, however, black people created many of the world's earliest and most enduring civilizations. Such was the case in India. In ancient India, more than 1,000 years before the foundation of Greece and Rome, proud and industrious black men and women known as Dravidians erected a classic high culture. Of the Dravidians, Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler who got around, observed that, and I want you to listen to what he had to say. He said, "The darkest man is here, the most highly esteemed and considered better than the others who are not so dark." Let me add that in very truth, these people portray and depict their gods and their idols black, and their devils as white as snow. This is 800 years ago. For they say that, you like that, huh? For they say that God and all the saints are black, and the devils are all white. That is why they portray them as I have described. Now, about 3,500 years ago, classical civilization in India was disrupted by the incursion of violent, nomadic, patriarchal white tribes known as Aryans, A-R-Y-A-N-S. The Aryans were products of a place called the Eurasian Steppe. This was a region characterized by a fear and hostility towards things foreign. Extreme individualism, characteristics some of us are picking up. Moral and material solitude, and what could only be called a pessimistic view of life itself. The ferocity of nature in the Eurasian steppe created instincts essential for survival in such an environment. In this land, nature left no illusion of goodwill. It was merciless and allowed no negligence. And in the course of a long, painful, and bitter existence, Europeans could not afford the luxury of believing in a beneficent God that would shower down generous methods of gaining a livelihood. The harsh environment of Northern Europe in general and the Eurasian steppe in particular engendered in its people a harsh personality, a cold and cruel nature, a violent, austere, and competitive culture and mentality. It was this type of culture, this type of mentality the white people introduced into India. Now, the Aryans were not necessarily superior warriors and were not especially courageous on the battlefield. But they were aggressive, they developed sophisticated military technologies, and they glorified military virtues. After hundreds of years of conflict, the Aryans succeeded in subjugating most of northern India. And throughout the conquered territories, a rigid caste segmented, I'm going to talk about caste in some detail, a caste segmented social order was established with the masses of conquered black people who were called Sudras, essentially reduced to slaves and imposed upon for service in any capacity required by their white conquerors. This vicious New World Order, which might be called a precursor to South African apartheid, was cold-blooded. I'm talking about 4,000 years ago now, before the slave trade, was cold-bloodedly racist, with the whites on top, the so-called mixed races in the middle, and the overwhelming majority of black people on the very bottom. In fact, the Aryan term Varna, V-A-R-N-A, that is the classical division of Indian society, which is used interchangeably with caste, literally means color or complexion. That's the social order of India. It means color or complexion. Truly, India is still a racist country. White supremacist David Duke claimed, and this is a direct quote, that his 1970s visit to India was a turning point in his views on the superiority of the white race. Not Mississippi, Georgia, or Alabama, India. Caste law in India, based originally on color and race, regulated all aspects of life, including marriage, diet, education, residence, and occupation. This is not to deny that there were certain elements within the black aristocracy that managed to gain prominence in the dominant white social structure. The mass of conquered blacks, however, were regarded by the whites as untruth itself. The whites claimed to have emerged from the mouth of God. The blacks were said to have emerged from the feet of God. It was written that a black who intentionally reviles whites by criminal abuse or criminally assaults them with blows shall be deprived of the limb with which he offends. If he has criminal intercourse with a white woman, his organs shall be cut off and all his property confiscated, brothers. If the woman had a protector, the Sudra, the black person, shall be executed. If he listens intentionally to the recitation of a sacred text, his tongue shall be cut out. This is Hindu law. This is Indian law. This is white folks in India. If he commits them to memory, his body shall be cut in half. With the passage of time, this color-oriented, racially-based social order became the foundation of the religion which is practiced throughout all India. This is a religion known as Hinduism. Now, as savagely as the Sudras of India, everybody still with me? Yeah, right. As savagely as the Sudras of India were dealt with, the greatest victims of white racism in India have been the untouchables. Indeed, probably the most substantial percentage of all the black people in Asia can be identified among India's 160 million untouchables. You've heard me talk about them before. You will hear me talk about them again because they are the largest population of black people outside of Africa, and they are the most oppressed people in the world. No question about that, and that's a lot of people. The untouchables are the long-suffering descendants of Aryan Sudra unions and native black populations who retreated into the hinterlands of India in their efforts to escape the advancing Aryan sphere of influence to which they ultimately succumbed. India's untouchables number more than the, listen to this now, India's untouchables number more than the combined populations of England, France, Belgium, and Spain put together. The existence of untouchability has been justified within the context of Hindu religious thought as the ultimate and logical extensions of karma and rebirth. Must have been something that you did in a previous lifetime They say that's why you're born an untouchable. Hindus believe that persons are born untouchable because of the sins accumulated in previous lifetimes. Hindu texts describe these people as foul and loathsome, and any physical contact with them was considered polluting. Literally, any physical contact with them was considered an abomination to God. And there are three categories of them. The first group are simply called the untouchables themselves. Their touch is considered polluting or contaminating. Secondly, you have a group called the unapproachables. Their shadow is considered polluting. Cold, ain't it? And it varies in different parts of India how close you can get to them. Some places is 11 feet. Some places 75 feet. And then you have another group called the invisibles or unseeables. Their sight is considered polluting. And in large cities in India, until the 1920s, these people were not allowed to enter the cities within daylight hours because it was thought their shadows will cause pollution. These are black people. Untouchables were usually forced to live in pitiful little settlements on the outskirts of Hindu communities. During certain periods in Indian history, untouchables were only allowed to enter the adjoining Hindu communities at night. Indeed, the untouchable shadows were considered polluting, and they were required to beat drums and make loud noises to announce their approach. Untouchables had to attach brooms to their backs to erase any evidence of their presence. They had to attach a broom to their back so that when they walked down the street, I've seen it, so that when they walked down the street, these thorny branches would erase, any evidence that they had been there. Cups were tied around their necks to capture any spittle that might escape their lips and contaminate roads and streets. Their meals were taken or consumed from broken dishes. Their clothing was taken from corpses. They were forbidden to learn to read and write and were prohibited from listening to any of the traditional Hindu texts. Untouchables were denied regular access to public wells. They could not use ornaments and were not allowed to enter Hindu temples. The primary work of untouchables included scavenging and street sweeping, emptying toilets, the public execution of criminals, the disposal of dead animals and human corpses, and the cleanup of cremation grounds. The daily life of the untouchable was filled with degradation, deprivation, and humiliation. Now, the basic status of India's untouchables has changed little since ancient times, and it has recently been pointed out, quote, that caste Hindus, listen to this now, this was written in 1992. Caste Hindus do not allow untouchables to wear shoes, ride bicycles, use umbrellas, or hold their heads up while walking in the street. Untouchables in urban India are crowded together in squalid slums, while in rural India, where the vast majority of untouchables live, they are exploited as landless agricultural laborers and ruled by terror and intimidation of this. Now, as evidence of this, let me cite several cases from different parts of India. For example, these cases were taken in 1991. Could have been taken last night, today, tomorrow. For example, on June 23rd, 1991, 14 untouchables were massacred in the eastern state of Bihar. That's the state where Buddha is supposed to have received enlightenment. On August 10th, 1991, 6 untouchables were shot to death in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. On August 16th, 1991, that's my birthday, not 1991, August 16th, an untouchable woman was stripped in public and savagely beaten in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh. I gave a lecture in Andhra Pradesh in 1987. On the 6th of September 1991, in the western state of Maharashtra, listen to this now, an untouchable police officer was killed for entering a Hindu temple. It was raining, pouring cats and dogs, as they say. Brother sought refuge in a temple. He was beaten to death for entering the temple. Official Indian figures on violent crimes by caste Hindus against untouchables have averaged more than 10,000 cases per year, with the figures continuing to rise. The Indian government listed 14,269 cases of atrocities by caste Hindus against untouchables in 1989 alone. 15,000 cases were documented in that one year. However, Indian human rights workers report that a large number of atrocities against untouchables, including beatings, gang rapes, arson, and murders, are never recorded. Even when charges are formally filed, justice for untouchables is seldom dispensed. When I was in India, for example, there was a case where a man was brought on charges of raping a woman, admitted the crime. He was not, just like this woman that shot Latasha Harlins. She was sent home. Same thing happened to this guy. His hand was slapped and he was told, don't do it anymore. Are white people inherently evil? Are they born with an ingrained racist nature? How about Australia? Australia is officially the world's smallest continent. Unofficially, it is one of the most racist nations in the world. Australia, the term Australia, by the way, means the Great South Land. That is derived from the word austral, which means, I think, southern wind. Australia was settled at least 60,000 years ago, by black people who call themselves Koori, K-O-O-R-I, and who are usually referred to as Australian Aboriginals. Now, everybody who has seen images, photographs of the black people in Australia, everybody familiar with them, tend to be dark-skinned people, sometimes blonde hair, sometimes reddish hair, but it's usually straight or wavy, naturally straight and wavy, okay? That's why a lot of them people don't identify them as black. European anthropologists have oftentimes called them Caucasoid because of the texture of their hair. In January 1788, when Britain began using Australia as a prison colony and a convict settlement, an estimated 300,000 black people were spread across the continent in about 600 small-scale communities. Each of these communities maintained social, religious, and trade connections with its neighbors. The dumping of British convicts into Australia proved disastrous for the blacks, who soon became the victims of deliberate poisonings and calculated and systematic slaughters. Butchered and murdered like animals, decimated by tuberculosis and syphilis, swept away by other infectious diseases, their community structures and moral fibers shredded. By the 1930s, the Koori had been reduced to a pathetic remnant of about 30,000 people. 10% of them left. When the continent was invaded by whites in the 18th century, historians invariably included a section on the blacks who were acknowledged as the original inhabitants of the continent. After 1850, however, few writers referred to the blacks at all, and they were identified as a, quote, dying race. In 1859, Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, popularized the notion of biological and therefore social evolution, and scholars began to discuss civilization as a unilinear process with white people at the top and black people at the bottom. It should be noted that it was during this time that British and Australian scientists ran one of the biggest grave-robbing networks ever organized. Studies by an Australian scholar, white man, researching at Oxford University within the last 3 years, indicate that the graves of between 5,000 and 10,000 black people were desecrated, their bodies dismembered, or parts stolen to support a scientific trade. Even worse, it appears that many black people were systematically stalked, hunted down, and murdered to obtain their body parts as, quote, specimens for science. The whites involved in this ghoulish traffic, predecessors of Jeffrey Dahmer, apparently had little shame, and some of the documents relate to a traffic in Koori penises. By 1950, general histories of the continent by Australians almost never referenced the black people. During this period, the blacks, whether part or full blood, were excluded from all major white Australian institutions, including schools, hospitals, and labor unions. They could not vote. Their movements were restricted, and they were outcasts in white Australia. Today, the blacks of Australia are terribly oppressed and remain in a desperate struggle for survival. Recent demographic surveys, for example, show that the black infant mortality rate is the highest in Australia. Blacks have the shoddiest housing and the poorest schools. Their life expectancy is 20 years less than whites. Their unemployment rate is 6 times higher than the national average. Blacks did not obtain the right to vote in federal elections until 1961. They did not gain the legal right to consume alcoholic beverages until 1964. Now that, you can say what you want to about alcohol. The point is, for a culture to be able to tell you and regulate what you can drink is some profound domination. They were not officially counted as Australian citizens until after a constitutional amendment in 1967. Today, the Koori constitute less than 2% of the total Australian population. In the southern Australian state of Victoria, black people are virtually non-existent. Are white people inherently evil?
Yes.
Do they have an ingrained racist nature?
Yes.
How about Tasmania?
Killed him.
Now, as a child, and not all that long ago, I would watch cartoons, and there was, you smiling, so you know what I'm talking about, Tasmanian Devil. And you know what? Kentucky Fried Chicken is now running a commercial where the Tasmanian Devil is in there. By the way, I was in Louisville, Kentucky doing a lecture about 2 years ago, and I was told that Colonel Sanders ripped off the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken from a black woman.
I wouldn't doubt it.
You wouldn't doubt it, would you? Okay. Are white people inherently evil?
That's right.
Are they ingrained with a racist nature? Now, here's just Tasmania is the coldest piece I'm going to deal with tonight in many ways. I wanted to talk about India, and I'm going to come back to this in the summary. I wanted to talk about India because I was always taught that racist attitudes, racial notions came as a result of the slave experience. As Europeans gained ascendancy in the world this most recent time, as they sought to appropriate land from the Native Americans, as they began to butcher people around the world, that notions about the inferiority of various people came into being. That you could not rationally, without guilt, you couldn't sleep well at night, feeling that you were enslaving your fellow men and women. So it was taught that you're people who had no souls, they were not full human beings, and what you were doing, in fact, was for their own good. You were trying to civilize them. And brothers and sisters, believe it or not, I've heard intelligent black people, people with PhDs, which has been described as piled high and deep, who said, thank God for slavery, because at least it got us out of Africa. That is an ignorant man. That is what we're struggling with. See, we live in a very sick society. And as a result of that, all of us have a degree of that sickness. I'm the first one to tell you that I'm sick, because I live in a sick culture. How can you not be affected by it? We are struggling against that sickness every day. And history is one way to deal with that. It ain't the only thing, but it is an essential thing. Malcolm X said of all our studies, it is history that is most qualified to reward our research. Now, Tasmania is named after a Dutchman who landed there named Abel Jansen Tasman in 1652. And Tasmania is a place that is an excellent case study. It's a small island off the southeast coast of Australia, about the size of West Virginia, where you have a complete case of genocide. Jews like to talk about the Holocaust. I don't blame them. If it happened to me, I'd be talking about it too. Okay? They need to talk. We need to talk about our Holocaust, though, you see. And then when we talk about our Holocaust, we have to specify which one. Which one are you talking about, brother? We got a lot. We're undergoing one right now. Genocide is the complete destruction of a group of people. That happened in Tasmania. All of them are gone. And while I was preparing this lecture tonight, I happened to just look at a bibliography. I'm down on bibliographies. If you read my works, you know there are going to be some bibliographic listings for days. The book I have, Introduction to the Study of African Classical Civilization, there's 70 pages of bibliographies in there, right? Listen to some of these. This is in alphabetic order. This is just on Tasmania. I'll make a copy of it if you want. First one, by a guy named Herbert Bastow, Relic of a Lost Tasmanian Race. Second book, The Last of the Tasmanians. Book number 3, Hunted in Their Own Land. Book number 4, The Final Phase of the Extinct Tasmanian Race. Number 6, The Last of the Tasmanians. I won't even go over the numbers. The next one, In Black and White. The next one, this is a cold one. I haven't even seen this one yet. Tasmanian Aboriginal Women as Slaves. The next one, The Final Solution Down Under. The next one, The Tasmanian Story of a Doomed Race. The next one, Black War, The Extermination of the Tasmanian Aboriginals. And last but not least, Tasmania, The Ultimate Solution. Are white people, by their very nature, evil? Are they inherently evil?
Yeah.
Are they ingrained with a racist nature? Let's deal with Tasmania and genocide in Tasmania. This is the last section, and then we'll have a break, and we'll have some slides. Because I don't want to just stand here and give you a horror story. But I will say this, because it used to be almost impossible for me to give a presentation like this. And it was very painful emotionally for me. But you know what? as painful as it is for us to talk about this, it's much more painful for the people who endured it. And you know what else? We have to be a living monument to these black people, ourselves, every day, to show that those black people who were butchered, hunted like animals, stalked, castrated, did not die in vain. That we are going to do something about that. And I'm not just talking about as individuals, because individuals don't mean that much to me. I'm talking about us as a community, as organizations, as institutions, as a nation, as a global African community. I don't even talk about an African diaspora, but a global African community of which there are about 800 million of us scattered around the world. A couple hundred million of us in India alone. Now, perhaps the black people of Tasmania, the black people of Australia, the Koori, should consider themselves fortunate. The black Aborigines of Tasmania were completely wiped out. Tasmania, an island only slightly larger than West Virginia, lies 200 miles off Australia's southeast coast. The island's first inhabitants, black people, arrived about 10,000 years ago, perhaps by land bridge from Australia. Abel Jansen Tasman, the Dutch navigator after whom the island is named, anchored on the 1st of December, 1642. On 28th of January, 1777, the British landed on the island. And from that moment, the fate of the black people of Tasmania was sealed. It was in 1802, following the state of New South Wales, Australia, that Tasmania was established as a British convict settlement. That meant they took the worst of their convicts, the worst of their prisoners, out of British prisons and brought them to Georgia, New Zealand, Australia, and Tasmania, and settled them to settle the land for the British Crown. A grossly inefficient penal system allowed white convicts to escape into the Tasmanian hinterland, where they exercised the full measure of their bloodlust and brutality upon the island's black occupants. The colonial government itself was not even inclined to consider the blacks as full human beings. And this was a time when people were talking about the missing link. And black people in Australia and Tasmania were identified as a missing link between humans and so it was thought ape-like ancestors. To the Europeans of the island, the blacks were a people fit only to be exploited in the cruelest of manners. As early as 1804, the British began to slaughter, kidnap, and enslave the blacks. Punishment in Tasmania was exceedingly rare for the whites, although occasionally whites were sentenced for their wanton cruelty towards blacks. For example, there's the record of a man who was severely flogged for exhibiting the ears and other parts of a black boy that he had mutilated alive, and another for cutting off the little finger of a black person and using it for a tobacco stopper. This vile and animalistic behavior on the part of the white settlers of Tasmania was the rule rather than the exception. Whites thought nothing of tying black men to trees and using them for target practice. White convicts, listen to this now, it ain't pretty, but I want you to listen. You know what history does? History tells you who you are, tells you what you did, tells you who your enemy is.
That's right.
Tells you what you can do, and it tells you what you must do. It's not always glorious. Although those of us who have been talking about antiquity, Kemet in particular, the last 10, 15 years, have mostly been talking about information for inspiration. We need something to motivate us. We need something that shows us what our greatness and potential is as a people. But here, we're looking at unfavorable white-black relationships. White convicts regularly hunted black people for sport, casually shooting, spearing, or clubbing the men to death, torturing and raping the women. There's even documentation of whites murdering black people so that they might be used as dog food. Black infants were roasted alive. Black women were kidnapped and chained and exploited as sexual slaves. Between 1802 and 1830, the black people of Tasmania were reduced from an estimated 8,000 to 5,000 people to less than 75 people in 28 years. By 1843, there were only 50 survivors. After the Black War, the official designation for the campaign of terror against the black people of Tasmania, because of political expediency, the status of the blacks, who were no longer regarded as a physical threat, was reduced to that of a nuisance and a bother. and with loud and pious exclamations that it was for their own benefit, the remainder of the blacks were rounded up and placed in concentration camps. This is in the 1840s, in concentration camps. William Laney, I'll show you a picture of him, facetiously known as King Billy, was the last full-blood male Tasmanian. He grew up at a place called Flinders Island, Tasmania, until the age of 13, when he was removed with the remnant of his people to a concentration camp called Oyster Grove, or Oyster Cove. Ultimately, he became a sailor. I'm almost finished. And some years he went whaling. With a steady decrease in the number of blacks, the white people of Tasmania began to take an interest in Laney. In January 1868, he was introduced to Prince Alfred. He returned ill from a, I'm not impressed. He returned ill from a whaling voyage in February 1869, and on March 2nd, 1869, he died in his room at the Dog and Partridge Public House. On March 6, 1869, the day of the funeral, about 50 or 60 residents interested in Laney and determined that he should at least have a fine burial assembled at the hospital. Rumors were circulating that the body had been mutilated, and to satisfy the mourners, the coffin was opened. When those who had wished to do so had seen the body, the coffin was closed and sealed. Meanwhile, it was reported that on the preceding night, a surgeon had entered the dead house where Laney lay, skinned the head, and removed the skull. The head of a patient who had died in the hospital on the same day was similarly skinned, and the skull was placed inside Laney's scalp and the skin drawn over it. In keeping with the tradition, no one was punished. It was said that Laney's body was reduced to a mass of fat and blood. William Laney, the last black man in Tasmania, was gone. That's 1869. In May 1876, Truganini, also known as Lala Rook, I will also show you a photograph of her, the last full-blood person in Tasmania, died at 73 years of age. Her mother had been stabbed to death by a white person. Her uncle had been shot by a white person. Her sisters were kidnapped by white people. Her intended husband was drowned by two white men in her presence while his murderers raped her. It might be said that Truganini's numerous personal sufferings typify the tragedy of the Tasmanian people as a whole. Don't let them cut me up, she begged the doctor as she lay dying, and they didn't. After her burial, Truganini's body was exhumed, and her skeleton, strung upon wires, was placed upright in a box and became for many years the most popular exhibit in the Tasmanian Museum. It remained on display until 1947. They didn't cut her up, though. Finally, in 1976, and by the way, finally, in 1976, the centenary year of Truganini's death, despite the museum's objections, her skeleton was cremated and her ashes scattered at sea. Truganini's life effectively chronicles the association between white people and black people in Tasmania. During this period, the black people of Tasmania were debased, degraded, and eventually exterminated. Are white people inherently evil? No. In spite of their history and irrespective of their record in ancient and modern India, in Australia, in Tasmania, the transatlantic slave trade and the rape of Africa, indeed their record all over the world with no exceptions. If anybody can tell me an exception, I'm a historian, I'm objective, people call me a scholar, I will write it down. Indeed, their record all over the world, however, I remain unconvinced as a scholar and historian that white people are inherently evil or possessed of an ingrained nature, racist nature. Am I crazy? I contend that people are the products of their environment. Nevertheless, given the long and well-documented history of carnage, cruelty, and savagery displayed by white people in general, and the monstrous pain and suffering black people have endured as a result of contact with them, it is difficult not to ponder the question. Now, that's the paper. You draw your own conclusions. My job, and you have to ask yourself what your job is. My job as a historian. My job is to present this information to you, and you draw whatever conclusions you want. I do not believe people are born with a racist nature. No more than I believe black people are born crackheads, are born violent, are born criminals. That is learned behavior. Nevertheless, I would have to say that Europeans are the product of a perverse and a sick culture. And the less we have to do with them, the healthier we are. That's the paper I wanted to present to you. With that, we will take a break. I once again encourage you to pick up some of the materials. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me tell you what you got over here. Because not only that, I want this information to be disseminated. That gives my life a sense of purpose. You have one tape over here called Black Death Down Under. And it is a detailed examination of what has happened to black people in Australia and the South Pacific. There's another audio tape called An African Asian Update that contains a live interview with a black untouchable from India, one of my close friends, who tells stories about how it was when he was growing up, how he got out of India, about how he went back to India in 1991, and there was a case of a little black boy who accidentally touched a cigar of an upper caste Hindu, and as a result of that was forced to eat human excrement and drink human urine. These are the 1990s in India. These are things that must be told. Those are the materials that are available, audio, videotapes, and the books. I'll be happy to autograph a book for you. With that, we'll take a break. I hope everybody will stay, and I will show you some lively slides, and anything that I did not say, I'll say then. Once again, we want to thank The Good Life and Brother Jamal. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. That's what I was talking about in terms of this thriving trade in Australia and the body parts of black people in Australia. Literally the penises of black men. I went to England. I lectured there for the first time in 1987, and I met a group of Africans. You know, it's great when you go places, no matter where you are. This year I lectured in Japan and Belize. Year before last I lectured in France and England and Egypt. And every time I go someplace, I don't care where it is. I believe if I went to Antarctica, there would not be any exception. There are pockets of black folks, African study groups, African-centered movements. I met a sister who told me that she had done some work in the British Museum, or maybe it was the Museum of Man, Natural History in England, and she told me that they had the heads of black people in Australia that had been decapitated and were floating in a solution. And now a lot of these black folks in Australia and various other parts of the world are demanding that at least those parts be sent back. Even during the Olympics a few years ago, there was a big to-do about a body of a black man from South Africa, which was on display in a museum in Spain. See? That makes you wonder if these people are by their nature evil. And once again, I don't believe that. I'm not telling you that you ain't got to believe that, but I don't, okay? I'm not saying but I will say this. Their culture is evil. Their culture is devilish. Now, let's get on with the slide presentation. Before we do that, stand up, my brother Lemuel. This brother has stopped everything he was doing to help me set up the slide projector, and now he's stand up, and he's running a projector. This is what it's all about. This is our future. This is Brother Lemuel. Give him a round of applause. Thank you, brother. Now, we're going to take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We're not going to stay late. We might have to focus that a little bit. You know how to focus it, brother? How does it look? Is it sharp? All right.
Very sharp.
It's a matter of fact.
Right there, very sharp.
Let's start with this one. Now, here we are. We're in India. The northwest portion, the mountains, well, actually, it's right here. You see the river right there, the river valley? That's called the Indus River Valley. And that's where early civilization developed. Civilizations tend to develop in the earliest phases in river valleys. And why is that? Because rivers facilitate transportation. They facilitate irrigation. They facilitate communication. And what is the site of the earliest civilization that we can identify? The Nile River Valley. And then next, as we move out of Africa, the next great civilization that we can identify will be in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley in modern-day Iraq, a country that was formerly called Mesopotamia, which means a Greek word which means the land between the two rivers, the rivers being the Tigris and Euphrates. And in ancient times, it was called Sumer, the land of the black-headed people, black folks. And then we find another great civilization after that, moving progressively further and further from Africa, and that is here in the Indus River Valley in modern-day Pakistan. Now, before India became independent on August 15th, I think, 1947 or 48, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka were one country. And the British partitioned that, Pakistan becoming a country of the Muslims. But that is where the early civilization began. It's called the Indus Valley Civilization because of the river. And it was the people called Dravidians were the ones who built that. Next slide. Now this is one of the cities. I'm going to show these slides quickly. If you've seen my presentations, you've probably seen some of these, but I think I will have at least 2 or 3 new pieces. This is one of the cities. It's called Mohenjo-Daro. In Urdu, that name means the mound of the dead. And it was called that because in the 1920s, when serious archaeological investigations began to take place, or excavations, they found piles of dead bodies, of skeletal remains, that came as a result of those early Aryan invasions, and the massacres that took place, and the bodies lay there for thousands of years, buried under rubble. This city is built in very sophisticated concept of city planning. It's built in upper and lower levels, multiple storied houses, uniform and standard weights and measures, a sophisticated sewage system, trash chutes. They had a game similar to chess. They invented the windmill. They domesticated the chicken. They domesticated a species of cotton. They played a game similar to dice. And there are about 400 of these cities. This is one of the 2 largest ones that have been excavated. They go as far north in Central Asia as Afghanistan, and as far into the south of India as just above the city of Bombay. Next. This is an example of the writing. The script has never been effectively deciphered. You can see the script on top of the seal with the Brahma bull. Next. Now, when the Aryans came into the country, next slide, Lemuel, Brother Lemuel, when the Aryans came into the country, writing, the whole civilization was disrupted for about 1,000 years. And civilization developed by black people was set back. This is a cylinder seal. This was used to stamp private property. And this is an example of the writing system that the black people developed. Next. This is one of the early pieces from the Indus Valley. You get an idea as to what the people look like. A man's head, a man's face. Next. Something else, I had a little brief article published in a knowledge broker about a month ago, which I never got a copy of, by the way. And they used this article, they used this picture right here. And the nose is reminiscent of many pieces that you will see in Kemet. Next. Now this is Krishna. Now the documentation for the destruction of black civilization in India is most effectively documented in an early book called the Rig Veda. I don't know what the word rig means. It's Sanskrit. That is the language introduced by the Europeans, and now that is regarded as the sacred language of Hinduism. Hinduism is the only religion on earth that is written into its creed, written into its doctrine, that social inequality. All religions practice that. Hinduism is written into it as an official part of its doctrine, that people are born untouchable. See? Now, Krishna is mentioned in the Veda, the Rig Veda. By the way, the term Veda is another Sanskrit word. It means knowledge. And there are 4 Vedas. The Rig Veda is the most significant. Now, here you have Krishna, who is identified as a black resistance fighter. Krishna is always identified as black. He's the Indian Hercules. Sometimes people would identify him with Christ. Indeed, the name Krishna and Christ are remarkably similar. Krishna is supposed to have been a shepherd, a cowherd, I should say. Christ was a shepherd. Krishna was born of a virgin birth. So was Jesus Christ, supposedly. Krishna rose from the dead. So was JC. This is a picture of Krishna holding up the burden of the mountain of the world. Krishna, the name literally means black. Literally. Next. Now, if it was me, I'd let it fall on those folks. Now, this is from, I'm trying not to do much editorializing, but I'm getting tired and it's almost time to go, so let me just let it out. Now, I want you to understand, although I don't believe white folks are inherently evil, I do not care for white people. I don't like white women. I don't even like white sheets on my bed. But I want you to know that I do not think that they're inherently evil. To me, that's silly. Right? That's to me. Now, I could be wrong. That may make some people mad. But I do think that it is important that we be able to reason together, that we be able to talk about anything, right? That we submerge our own individual, ideas for the collective. Now, that's what it's about. If we can't do that, we can't move forward. If we're so dogmatic and so narrow in our views, how can we move forward as a people?
That's right.
Think about that.
Teach, brother.
Now, this is a black man, also from India, from a civilization called the Kushan dynasty. Next. I know some folks believe white people come from Pluto. You've seen this before. I show this one all the time. Next. This is a black man who was introduced into India directly as a slave. Now, you have about 4 migrations into India. You have black people as the first Indians, little bitty black folks, Batwa, Mutwa. Sometimes you call them pygmies, Negritos. In various parts of Asia, they're known as Akta or Etta. Samang, Sakai, right? Andamanese. And then you have larger black folks with straight to wavy hair, like the Australians. And then you have another group of black people that came and introduced large cities, urbanization, written languages, and what have you. I call them the Dravidians. And then you have one other group that have come there directly as slaves, primarily from East Africa. They were called the Sidis. And this is one such black man. He was born in 1575 in Gondar, Ethiopia, same place Dr. Ben was born. And he was taken to Asia as a slave, or he became a slave, and ultimately he became a king in the West Indian state of Gujarat. You can see their descendants in South India in a place called Karnataka. I've seen it with my own eyes, in Janjira Island, and there were some rough Africans, fierce warriors. It is said that if they would guard the ships of Muslims that went to Mecca and Medina from India, and it is said if just one of these brothers was aboard the ship, no pirate would dare molest that ship. They were said to be ferocious in battle, and they would field up to 50,000 of them when it came to going to war. They were tough. The head of them was called the Admiral of the Indian Ocean and received an annual stipend of 300,000 rupees every year.
What was the brother's name again?
That's Malik Ambar, King Ambar. He built all his monuments out of black stone. He built the post office. He built the mosque. He sent an African ambassador to the court of Persia, and he did something that endeared him to me today. He put historians on pension. Right? They didn't have to worry about nothing. Bless that brother's heart. Right? Next. Now let's look at black people in India today. You've seen some of these slides, you'll see them again. It ain't like they're on CNN and all that stuff. This is Runoko talking now. Here's my main man right here. We want to start with this brother. Looks like just like some folks in the audience today. Dr. Ben wrote a 4-volume book in the mid-1980s called They All Look Alike, and he had something there. Now let's look at some of those people. Let's go through these quickly. We're not going to take a lot of time. Next. I don't show this one too often. I don't know how old that sister is, but she's mighty wrinkled up. A lot of wisdom, I would imagine, there. Next. Now, this brother looks more like the black folks in Australia.
Yeah.
And they are to be found in central India. Most of them are in south central India. Isn't that deep? South central. And I'm not talking about Fox TV, the television show. South central. Next. 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 There's my lady right there. Most of these photographs were taken in the early part of the 20th century. The British had colonized every part of India, and they sent ethnologists to write up every part of the country. There's a 4-volume book from North India. There's a 4-volume book, I have a copy of it, from Central India, and there's a 9-volume text from South India. All of them deal with tribes and caste. And that's where I got a lot of these photographs from. That's how I got into India. At UCLA about 1980, I just started going through book after book after book, old books, and some pictures started falling out of some of those books. And I began to make slides of those. I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Begin to document it. Yes, sir, brother, if it's real brief.
Would she be regarded as untouchable?
It's very possible. Now, you have the caste system. There are 4 major castes. And it's said that each caste came from a different part of God's body. The topmost, and each caste is identified with a color. The topmost caste supposedly comes from the mouth of God, or Brahma. And therefore the castes are called the Brahmins. That caste is identified with the color white. Those are the poets and priests in society. You have a priestly aristocracy. Beneath them, you have another group called the Kshatriyas, coming from the shoulders or biceps of God, identified with the color red. They're the soldiers and administrators in society. Then you have the Vaishya, coming from the thighs of God, identified with, this is in the Rig Veda now, you can read it yourself, coming from the thighs of God. They are the farmers and merchants. And then you have the Sudras, regarded as untruth itself, coming from the feet of God, black, right? And they are supposed to work for the upper three castes in any capacity required. And then outside of them, you have the outcasts or the untouchables. Now the castes have been, there are thousands of subcastes. And you know what else is cold-blooded now? Maybe the coldest part of all, even among the untouchables, there are degrees of untouchability. So some untouchables are less touchable than others. That's why they can't overcome the social structure, because they're all divided into little bitty groups. Not all the untouchables are black either. Most of them are, but I've seen some untouchables that could pass for white folks. That's like a blue moon, though. How many people have seen a blue moon? Not many people. You will see one every now and then. Most of the untouchables are black, but the untouchables, also called the outcasts, Mohandas Gandhi called them Harijans, which means children of God. That's an offensive term to most of these people. Most of them call themselves, if you could just hold it, brother, most of them call themselves Dalit, D-A-L-I-T, meaning crushed, broken, and oppressed. Those are the more militant ones. There's a bad publication that comes out of India called Dalit Voice, the voice of the persecuted nationalities denied human rights. Comes out twice a month. It is $40 a year in annual subscription rate. It is the most effective voice of the black untouchables of India. And guess who's the United States representative for it? I am. I encourage you to subscribe to it. $40 a year is a lot of money for them. Right? The untouchables, she may be an untouchable. Next. And these people are from South India here. Now this sister is called a tribal person. Tribal people are treated like untouchables. But these are people who have really never been assimilated into the Hindu social structure. Lots of dignity, lots of pride. It is said that these bangles represent wealth. Now the term Dalit encompasses all of that. It encompasses tribal people and people in the city slums who are called untouchables. By the way, women in India are viciously exploited. If you're black and you're an untouchable and you're a woman. Next. AIDS is spreading there left and right too. And it's heterosexual sex that's causing it. Dalit women, black women, untouchable women are literally in some cases chained up and treated as sexual slaves, and they're taken from village to village. And as they move, they take the AIDS virus with them. It is said by the year 2000 there will be more AIDS cases in India alone than all of Africa put together. And these are primarily black people, because when the lights go down, all that stuff about untouchability gets thrown out the window. And black women are viciously exploited. In the city of Bombay, prostitution is legal. And the municipal government of Bombay is literally the pimp. They get a cut. And most of the women are young black women, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. The ones at 15 or 16, they really look all used up. I have it documented on video. I'm going back to India eventually, okay? And I hope to lead an African-centered tour there at some point in time. You know, I hope some of us will be able to go, because black people in India are very much interested in African people here. I understand that there was recently a conference where the leadership of the untouchables of India declared themselves a part of the African Revolution. It's in India. That's something Marcus Garvey would be proud of.
That's right.
See, as difficult as things are today, we are living in a very exciting time, because we're living in a time where we are clarifying our identity, who we are. White folks have thrown everything they have got at us, and we have survived it. Now, how do we move from the level of survival to a level of conquest? I want to be in power again. See? That's what I want. That's what Runoko Rashidi is about. So that we are defining also or developing a new kind of scholarship. This is not the kind of scholarship that is going to be taught at Harvard or Yale. This is the kind of scholarship that we need to liberate ourselves, though. I believe that liberation will come from our community and not a college campus. You can clap for that, because I believe that. Now, this didn't come out very good, and this is the first time I've ever shown this slide. This is supposed to be an Indian gypsy. You do have people called gypsies in India, and I met some of them in South Central India, too. Some people believe that that gypsies are ultimately derived from Egypt. Egypt, gypsy. Next. These folks are called Vedas, and they are a very ancient group of people. They actually live in the country that today is called Sri Lanka, to the south of India. Next. Same thing. Next. We're back in India now. Next. It's supposed to be a holy man. Next. Next. Nice picture. We need to see more children at some of these programs. I spoke at a conference in Tacoma, Washington last month. It was literally a children's conference. We always talk about how the youth are the future. Where are they at? Somehow or another, we have to integrate them in the programs that we're involved in. Somehow we have to do that. I don't know how. Next. Now, I do not believe, is an untouchable. You do have some black people in higher social structures. You even have some black Brahmins, but there are not many. In fact, there's a proverb in India, beware of a black Brahmin. Next. This is a cave in South India. This is where a lot of the people were driven because they didn't want to submit to white domination. And they live there today. Next. Now, when I went to India, I stayed in the cities all the time. And I saw some areas, some slum areas. I was taken to one slum area by a member of the Dalit Panthers, their version of the Black Panther Party. Yeah, I went to their office and met with them. I met with the leadership of a group called the Dalit Liberation Army. The Dalit Liberation Army. They know about Garvey. I found somebody gave me a biography written in the Indian language of Langston Hughes. They had copies of Roots over there. We need to understand the impact that we have on other people around the world. People be looking at us. They know about Soul Train. Don Cornelius, I was ashamed of that, okay? Yeah, I don't want to be identified with that. Certain black folks, I don't want to be identified with. I don't want to be identified with Clarence Thomas, Michael Jackson.
OJ.
Now, that could be the Negro of the Year. I ain't going to mess with OJ because that'll take us on another trip. This is a sister from South Central India. Michael Jackson, we could talk about him all night. Toyota, all of them. Next. All right, this is another holy man. That's what Lynn Jeffries called, what's her name? LaToya? He calls her Toyota Jackson. I like that. Next. Next. Keep going. She's pretty. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures, too. This is taken from a book called The Tribes and Castes of the Southern Provinces of India by a guy named Edgar Thurston. And this is a tribal person, and he reminds me so much of the Maroons. Now, the Maroons are black folks who refused to submit to slavery. In Belize in February, I was taken and I lectured in a place called Dangriga. And these are things I'm very proud of. Very proud of that. All right? Never thought I would be doing this. And love it. Don't make a lot of money, but my time is free. And I feel like I'm doing something very noble. I feel like I'm doing something that's going to survive me. There's another question. When we talk about Kemet, we might talk about Imhotep. We might talk about Aha. We might talk about Khufu. These are people that lived 5,000 years ago. They did something so significant that 5,000 years after their death, we still talk about them today. That is something very profound to think about. What are we doing that people will be talking about 5 minutes after we're gone? Not 5,000 years. Some people be glad to see us gone. But to be talking about immortality, it is said to speak the names of one's ancestors is to make them live again. Next. Now there's one I don't show very often. These are all in India now. Next. That's Satya Sai Baba. Now, he's a Sudra. He's not an untouchable. He's a Sudra. And you notice I used the word deliberately, untouchable. That's what they wanted me to use, although they don't like the word. I said, hey, man, brothers and sisters, what can I do? And they said, what we want you to do, Brother Runoko, more than anything else, is to tell people about us. Tell the world what's going on. And they deliberately like the word untouchable because, I see, we're running out of time. It speaks to their condition. Next. There's a heck of a picture, and that's a Brahmin. uppermost caste. Next. Fine sister. Next. This is B.R. Ambedkar. He's the national liberator of the untouchables, you might say. He came to the United States in a relatively liberal time. He went to Columbia University. The greatest man, perhaps in the 20th century of India. He and Gandhi hated each other. And most of the untouchables of India hate Gandhi. They feel like he's the worst enemy of black people in the history of Asia. I want you to think about that when Martin Luther King's birthday comes up and Gandhi is trotted out. Gandhi was not a man of nonviolence. When Gandhi was in South Africa, he participated actively in war against black people, referred to black people as Kafirs, and did everything he could to sabotage the movement of untouchables in India. He is no friend of ours. He read the book Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington and came to the United States. Next. This is a photograph I took. I'm not a very good photographer, but I'm glad this one came out. This is the office in a place called Javadi on the outskirts of Bombay of the Dalit Panthers. They take their inspiration directly from the Black Panther Party. The Panthers need to know that. Those brothers and sisters paid a tremendous price. It's important to understand that the price we pay is not in vain, that it means something, that it has significance. You may not agree with everything they did. Brother asked me earlier what I thought about the Nation of Islam. I don't agree with everything the nation does, but I respect the Nation of Islam because they're trying to do something. What are you trying to do?
That's right.
Besides being critical, running your mouth, what are you doing? When you leave this room tonight, when you leave this building, when you leave the good life, what are you going to do? You see what I'm doing. I know what Astainu's doing. I know what Jamal Gori's going to do. What are you going to do? How are you going to affect the liberation of black folk? That's an individual responsibility. It was said in Kemet that ignorance is evil. In America, ignorance is bliss. Because when you are ignorant, you can be irresponsible. With knowledge comes responsibility. Once you learn something, what you gonna do? Black people, what you gonna do? We talking about I need a leader. What are you going to do? Next. That's my sermon for tonight. But we got to do some preaching.
You're right, though, brother. You're right, though.
Now, this is an Aryan. This is an Indo-European. This is representative of the people that invaded India 4,000 years ago. Next. And this is a person called, this is another tribe of Indo-Europeans, a representative called the Peoples of the Sea. They invaded Egypt 3 times in dynasties 19 and 20. Next. Pick it up. Buddhism comes as a Reformation religion. The earliest icons of the Buddha show him to be black, and they also reflect the fact that Buddhism does not recognize caste distinctions, and they became very popular among the black people of India. Next. These are just depictions of the Buddha. Next. Next. Check that one out. That's from India. Next. Now, these are black folks that have almost been wiped out, too, as a result of contact with white folks. And they are from an island chain in the Bay of Bengal off the coast of India called the Andaman Islands. Next. There are only a few thousand of them left, and they're very much like the Tasmanians, too. Next. That's a good one. These are just little black people. Next. In the Andaman Islands, off the eastern shores of India. Okay. That's who I saw when I was growing up in the cartoons.
He looks inherently evil.
He looks inherently evil. Are white people inherently evil?
Yeah.
Do they have an ingrained racist nature? You might as well have a good time. Next. He does look evil, don't he? Yes. That's your friend. Next. Now, in Australia, I have to get some new slides from Australia. I got a bunch of pictures. I just have to have slides made of them. And, of course, this is from an old book, and he is on a reserve. In these many cases, black people are not allowed to leave these reserves. The situation of black folks in Australia may be very similar to the Native American. Native American is the only large group of people outside of Africans, I'll be honest with you, that I have great sympathy and respect for. That I feel like they have suffered as much as we have, and they are brothers and sisters. And a lot of our own blood is integrated with that of Native Americans. So the struggle of Australians is very similar to that. By the way, until recently, there are only like 5 or 6 black people in Australia who had any kind of formal university education. They have been abused. Next. Now, this is William Laney, the last Tasmanian. Man, He was 34 at that time. He died in 1869. Next. And that's Lala Rook. There are several books that have been written about her. Most of them have been published, however, in Australia and Tasmania. I have a few of them. I do have a large collection of pieces on Australia and Tasmania. But just until recently, I was really not able to talk about it without just... Next. This is a sister from New Zealand. New Zealand, or Aotearoa, was also established as a British prison colony. Next. Ain't hardly none of them left either. Those people are called Maori. And then this sister's from Melanesia. Now, Melanesia, the islands of the South Pacific, by the way, the term Melanesia literally means black islands, melanin, Melanie. Yeah. Melanie, I think, means black one or something like that. That's Greek, Melanos, or black. Now, I put her in here, and I got 2 or 3 others because slavery was also introduced there. Many people are not aware of that. White people also enslaved black people in Melanesia. They called it blackbirding. Next. And people were taken from one island to the other for slave purposes. Now, look at that, brother. Ain't that cool? I believe if I keep looking, I'm going to find some black people somewhere with blue eyes. You know why? Because I think we're the mother and father of all humanity, and we replicate all the human types. Everybody comes from us. Pardon? Some of them do? That's cold. Next. Now, I don't know if that's naturally blonde or what, but it certainly is interesting. We need to go check them out. If I wasn't so drawn to India, Australia and the South Pacific would be the area I'd be most interested in. Because that's something that nobody's doing any work on that I know of. Understand that. People say, Runoko, what do you think I should do? I'm interested in this. Find an area of focus. Find an area that has been relatively untapped so we can document the global experience of African people. And there are a lot of different parts of the world that we have not really effectively explored, so we can join hands with our people around the world. That's something you can be proud of. And then you can come up here and people can clap for you. Next. And of course, that's my main man from Hawaii, Kamehameha I. They were almost wiped out by white folks. Another unfavorable, historically white-black relationship. Come on, a few more, we're going to get out of here. This is Liliuokalani. Now, Hawaii was intruded upon by British about 1788, I think by Captain Cook. And within 60 to 70 years, almost all the Hawaiians were gone. Same situation that affected black people in Tasmania, Australia, similar phenomenon in Hawaii. Next. Now, here's an area that has really not been looked upon too effectively. Another unfavorable case of white-black relationships, and that is black people in the Philippines. Now, you have black people there first, and then you have Far East Asians, Mongoloid types, which is, to me is an offensive word. In the Philippines, the Asian types are called Tagalog. Now, the blacks dominated until the Spanish came in the 1500s. In fact, the Philippines is named after Philip II of Spain. I always thought that was an indigenous name, but it's named after Philip II. And these little bitty black people were fierce, and they fought those Spanish left and right. It said when they killed a Spaniard, they would party for a week. Next. Now, these are from Vietnam. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever shown this slide before. They're called Annamites. And that's a whole group of black people right there.
Vietnam?
Vietnam. Central Vietnam. Next. These are from Malaysia. Next. Now, I'm just kind of giving you an introduction to the presentation I'm going to do at Church of Amun-Ra on 54th and 7th Avenue at 1 o'clock on January the 8th. I'd like for you to come down there. We'll continue. This is a black person. I've never even shown this slide before. Another black person from Malaysia. Next. These are from the Philippines. Next. That's Vietnam. I used that one deliberately. You see what happened to the face. They lost their history, so they died. Next. And last but not least, let me just show about 5 or 6 slides. I also wanted, although I did not get into it, I wanted to talk tonight about the Moors, too. I wanted to give an example of unfavorable white-black relationships in Europe. The Moors were black people that dominated the European, the Iberia, Spain and Portugal, and called it Al-Andalus, or Andalusia. from 711 to 1492. Now, interestingly enough, the white Spanish Christians never ceased to resist. They called this the world's longest liberation movement. And over a period of 800 years, they finally conquered the black people in Spain, enslaved them. A lot of the first slaves to come to the Western Hemisphere did not come from Africa. There were black people enslaved in Spain and brought over here. The books of the Moors were burnt. It is said the Moors had everything it took to make a civilization great. And now nobody knows anything about it. You can get a videotape and educate yourself. This is a black Moorish warrior from North Africa. The name Moor survives in Mauritania and Morocco. Next. They still have slavery over there, by the way. This is a black Moorish warrior in Spain in the 9th century. Just about 5 minutes and we're done. Next. Another one, just a close-up. Next. This is a black Moorish saint. Now, not all the Moors were Muslims. Some of them converted to Christianity. This is Saint Maurice. Maurice, my man. I know he's here. All right, Maurice Beatty, who I have great respect for, by the way. Maurice was the holy patron saint of the Holy Roman Empire for about 300 years. They have shrines to Saint Maurice as far north as Latvia and Lithuania in the Baltic states, in Riga. Tough brother. Next. That's Saint Maurice in heaven. That's the banner of Saint Maurice above him. That's Saint Maurice and Saint George and the Dragon. Now, Saint George we all know about. Saint Maurice is much less known, but he's far more significant. That banner was used by the crusading armies of Europe in the wars against the Slavs. Maurice also had supposedly a spear that he brought with him that was supposedly the spear used to pierce the side of Christ. This is a black man in Central Europe, in Germany, and you can go there and see his shrines. I have not been to Germany yet. I hope to go there at some point in time, not to hang out with the Germans, but to examine black artifacts there, like the Black Madonnas. Right. Shrines to St. Maurice. You have a black presence everywhere. We're talking about world history, of which black people have been the primary movers since the beginning of time. That's St. Maurice. Next. And there he is again. That's St. Benedict the Moor. He founded the Benedictine order of monks in Sicily. That's St. Benedict. Yeah, next. And I think this is the last slide for tonight. This is also a black man, as you can see. He is a black knight. And this is from 15th century France. Brothers and sisters, what I tried to do in the course of the evening is to examine the question, are white people inherently evil? Do they have an ingrained racist nature? You draw the conclusions that you see fit. I wanted to examine it by looking at unfavorable white-black relationships historically. We tried to focus on India, ancient and modern. That's my thing. You know, I'm working on 3 books. One is the revised edition of this book, The African Presence in Early Asia with Van Sertima. It'll be the last book published by the Journal of African Civilizations probably for the next 5 years. I'm working on another book called The Nile Valley and Beyond. But in front of me, I can see another one that has not been written, and that is The African Presence in Asia, ancient and modern. Not just the past, but today. That is a frontier that has not been effectively documented. And then we went to Australia. And we wanted to look at another part of the world that's not effectively explored. Black people with straight to wavy hair textures that were almost wiped out by Europeans. And last but not least, perhaps the most brutal case of all, but an interesting case study, and that is Tasmania. We studied the Tasmanian devil. And we saw that every last black person in Tasmania was destroyed. We, you and I, us, have to be living monuments to those black people and show that they did not die in vain. That we have grown as a result of our knowledge of them, and we pledge ourselves, each one of us, you and I, to the total liberation of black people around the world. Hotep, thank you very much. How about a round of applause for The Good Life and for my friend Jamal Goree. Now, some of this is speculative. I believe that just like I said, Europeans have a distinct culture, black people have a distinct culture too. I think that I had a quote that I was going to read by Chancellor Williams, where he addresses that. I think that our culture, in other words, to make it simple, I think that black folks have never learned how to deal with white people. And most people of color have not either. We tend to be, and I'm speaking very generally, live and let live, to believe that people will do the right thing, to just, if you don't bother me, I won't bother you. And that has just not worked out with Europeans. We did fight. We had an active resistance. But in some cases, I think, for example, in Tasmania and Australia, you also have a degree of isolation. People in Tasmania might have been isolated for 10,000 years. They have a culture that was very primal, very basic. For example, there's no evidence that black people in Tasmania engaged in fishing. They never found a hook. There's no evidence of agricultural science, no farming. They've not even found evidence that black people had domesticated fire. So that when a new group of people come into the country with firearms, a very aggressive, avaricious attitude, there was not much of a contest. Same thing for the Native Americans. And we know that Native American civilization was highly sophisticated. Look at the Aztecs. Very wealthy, strong warrior mentality. But within 10, 15, 25 years from the time, what's his name? Montezuma? Who's the guy? No, Montezuma was the Aztec. Cortez came. The Aztecs had bitten the dust. In the Caribbean, you have a Holocaust of unparalleled dimensions in the 16th century. Maybe 10, 15 million people were killed. They fought, but the contest was very unequal. And that is not to say the Europeans are superior, see? But it is to say that, you know, it causes us to examine that situation and how we got in the shape we're in. It's not a simple answer. Yes?
Okay, it's going to take some time for all of us to study and, you know, we didn't get it from the beginning, but at this point in time, we need to be trying to develop a think tank with the groups that are here about where we're going in the future. And the third thing I want to say is, have you considered using some of the new technology that's available to teach children about this? Kids, you know, the children now are computer, you know, have you used the new technology, CD-ROM, to teach them this?
I have not personally. I'm not, I guess, formally what you would call an educator. I'm not what you would call an academician. I'm a writer, a historian, and a lecturer. But I do teach. I lecture at a lot of schools, a lot of campuses, and I'm right now trying to work on a curriculum. What I want to do is write a textbook on a level for children. But once again, I think that's something that we all need to look at. Like, what is your individual responsibilities? What can you do? As a teacher, as a truck driver, as a window washer, whatever you are, how can we employ those technologies for the uplift of African people? And that is why we do need institutions, think tanks, organizations to figure out ways and means of doing that. I don't know who was next. Young brother. You can't. It's impossible to go to India and look at a person and tell if he's an untouchable. But more than likely, if a person is very dark, if they're black, if they're poor, if they're dirty, chances are he's an untouchable. When I went to India, in the airport, I saw people, I said, I know they're untouchables. Because I saw an old black woman with a broom that was the raggediest broom I'd ever seen, you know, sweeping up. And I knew that was an untouchable, and I was right about that. So more than likely, you could tell, but there's no real certain way of telling. This brother. I'm sorry, I don't know what order we're in. We're just going to try to get the best we can and make your questions brief and to the point so we can get everybody and we can let the folks at the Good Life go who look like they're beginning to get a little impatient. Next.
Why you don't think white people are inherent evil?
Well, it might just be sentimentality on my part, see? Because at the same time, you could use that same argument about black people. The highest rate of crime is in the black community. Right? Well, let me finish. Right now, some black person is knocking some other black person in the head. Right now, this minute, some black person is stealing from another black person. Right now, some black, I start to say man, is raping a sister. Now, I don't believe we were born like that. I believe that's sick. I believe that is a product that people are the product of their environment. I think that Wait a minute. Wait, sister. Wait a minute. I believe that people are the product of their environment. I also believe this, and maybe this is the sentimental part on me now. Now, I don't claim to be right. I'm just speaking from my perspective. That's all I can do. That if I believed people were inherently evil, I wouldn't believe there was any hope for the world. I would believe we will always be in a perpetual state of, we'd always be fighting white folks. What I would like to think is once black people get in power, then we can erect a type of culture that will never allow that to happen again. That's the best I can do.
That's right. How are you viewed? Yo, I'm next.
Just brief, brother.
And I wanted to ask you, in Tanzania,
Tasmania?
How many people are we talking in terms of their group, in terms of their tribes, or the breakup of the different groups that you was talking about when you were going around? What is their population in terms of size and masses of people?
Tanzania or Tasmania?
Tasmania.
I don't know if there were individual tribal affiliations. There probably weren't that many black people there in the first place, maybe about 15,000.
When you stayed in Bombay and you went around to the various different tribes or the various different townships, what were you looking at in terms of population?
I didn't visit any tribes.
Well,
the people that were tribal people were those that happened to be visiting the cities at the time. The people that I was with in India, the untouchables. Now understand this now, how this trip came about. All my partners, all my friends were going to Egypt. I've always been an oddball. I wanted to go to India. I heard that there was a big conference coming up. I wrote a friend of mine, the editor of this publication, Dalit Voice, who was a personal friend of mine. His name is V.T. Rashekar, one of the most revolutionary brothers in the world. He said, come on through. Not only come on, but we want you to attend this conference. So when I got to the conference in Hyderabad, India, in central India, there was a big poster. First day we got there. And I went and I read it. And Rashekar said, we ought to go to the conference site and see what's going on. So I went and saw a poster, and it said Runoko Rashidi. They even spelled my name right. Famous Afro-American historian will inaugurate the conference. Well, I said, well, I'll be. And I got just as nervous as I could be. And stole the show. Smashed it. You know why? Because of the admiration that they have for the struggle of African people in the United States. It wasn't nothing I did. But the very fact that a black person will come out of his pocket and go there and want to investigate, they found utterly remarkable. And here you're talking about a group of people who are taught that they are like filth, excrement. And the harshest thing about it is that most of them believe that. That's why I say they're the most oppressed people on earth. Because it is thoroughly ingrained that they literally ain't nothing. So I went to 4 different cities, by airplane and by train. Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Madras. And then I did a lecture in a little bitty town that I don't even remember the name of it. Nobody spoke English. All the brothers and sisters were in a church sitting on the floor with blue shirts on, because blue is like their national color for the Dalits. It's like red, black, and green is to us. I came by van. People met me outside, took me inside, and I walked in. And as soon as I got there, people started applauding. And I gave a presentation that had to be translated. I wanted to go into some of the villages, and they would not let me go there. They said, you'd have to sleep on the ground. I said, no problem with that. You have to eat our food, no problem with that. We still ain't going to let you go. Why? Because they were afraid. They were not afraid for me. They were afraid of what would happen to the people after I left, because there would be reprisals against them. So you seldom will get a chance to interact with tribal people, and you really do not get much of a chance to go into the hinterland. That's the next trip. India is like a racial and ethnic mosaic. It has every religion, it has every ethnic group, every caste you can think of, and a lot of them you can't think of.
Runoko, 30 seconds. 30 seconds. There's a paper I passed up. I've reduced my questions in writing. Your name is on it.
Okay.
Get that. Before you leave, take a poll. I'm interested. I think that the white man is inherently evil. Me too. Always evil. Take a poll. Let's see how many of us here believe.
All right, that's a good point. Just for fun.
Just for fun.
How many people, wait a minute, we're going to take this poll. How many people, raise your hands, come on now, let's show respect, believe that white people are inherently evil? That is to say, wait, I'm not finished the question now. This brother got both his hands up. Wait a minute. Wait. Listen, I want you to understand this. Are biologically, the nature, born that they can't help evil.
Right.
Right. All right, put your hands down. How many believe that they are not? Raise your hands.
Not all.
Jamal, we're going to have to do another lecture, huh? This brother wanted to put it to the test. Raise your hand if you're sure. Wait a minute. Always. You think so? Sister, yes. Come on now. Come on. I lectured here. I did about 5 lectures in about 4 or 5 months at The Good Life. And it was obvious I was getting repetitious, repeating the same thing. And Jamal said, Runoko, you got to come up with something controversial. Listen to the sister. What's the difference between instinctive and inherent?
Very little. And I say that because our very laws prove it. Whenever they murder someone, they kind of get swooped along, and and when we murder someone, we go to right. It's a big deal. We go to prison for life, or we're on death row or what have you. And I think that what they're doing, I don't think that they're doing it out of racial hatred. I think that they're doing it because they know that they're instinctively. They think that they can't help themselves, because that's their history. They used to eat people. They said we ate people. We never did that. Not until they came along. So that's why I wanted to say that before you took your vote. I think some of these people might change their mind.
Well, we will vote again right before we leave. All right, now, Brother Lemuel. Yes, sir. Thank you again for running the projector. I appreciate that, okay? When I see people like you, it gives me some hope for the future. Yes, sir.
When you were speaking of how most of the violent crimes are committed in black neighborhoods?
I said the highest concentration. And I could be wrong. I haven't done any statistics. Am I? Well, let's put it this way before you answer your question. Too much crime is committed in our own community against other black people. Wait. Yes. Yes, sir.
I lived in Glendale and also in the Valley.
Bless your heart.
In the Valley, most of the time, we had to take detours because there was lockups.
I went to school in the Valley.
We're going out and having cowboy shootouts and murdering men, waking up in the middle of the night, murdering their kids and stuff. It's not that most of the crimes are committed in our neighborhood. They just don't count points.
That could be.
In Glendale, they pull you over just for having a license plate.
I know that. And two, I think we have to look at the media.
That's right.
They focus on black people as though we are born criminals. Donnie, and then sister. Briefly now.
Well, what I really believe is the white man, he cannot afford a positive black image in his society. For one reason why, because when he look at your history, you let me watch that on OJ. When he look at your Michael Jordan, your Magic Johnson, imagine those kind of brothers being a positive brothers in a corporate America. Imagine your brothers being more commitment to their women, being a more positive image in their community. That's right. He cannot afford that because one reason why his women would jump the fence. Because what they look for, tall, dark, and handsome. They look at that. They see that. Matter of fact, when my partner of mine, ex-roommate of mine, went to a grocery store, he's real built.
Yeah.
And the little white boy behind us came in. He said, Daddy, look at Superman. Superman right here. And the daddy just smiled for a minute. But then it caught hold to him, then he started turning red. He said, this boy, his own son don't see the Superman in him. He sees it in this big, tall, black man. And he said, wait a minute, hold on. If my wife sees the same image, wait a minute, I'm gone from this earth.
Now, let me throw this out there, and then we'll go to the next question.
In their community, that's why they have served them others.
Okay.
We don't have that problem. The problem we have is commitment.
Okay. You know, what do you think about, at the same time, a black image like Colin Powell? A lot of white folks are saying they want to vote for him. I know what I think about him. But a lot of people are saying he ought to run for president. He's black. All right. All right, okay. Sister, you've been waiting to ask a question for about an hour and a half. Make it real brief. Better be a good one now.
I want to make a statement
Yes.
about America.
Brief. Brief now, yeah.
I want to say that America founded this country was a black man. Also, Ludwig van Beethoven that they're making a movie about, again, a black man. And he won't be black on the screen, but we know that he is black. And you were using the statement Aryan in reference to Caucasian people, and these are the Aryan people. Aryan means primal or first. And we were the first and primal people, therefore we are the Aryan. That was a term that was brought out in the 1940s by Hitler, and that is, again, a fallacy. And again, the American Indians were black people. Because if you take a Spaniard today and mix it with a black, you're going to still get a Mexican culture today.
All right.
That meant that the American Indians they show on the screen were not the American Indians that were here. They were black like us.
Feel better?
Yeah.
Who hasn't had a turn? All right, brother.
I wanted to ask you about Hannibal.
Yes, sir.
Was he a Moorish?
Hannibal wasn't a Moor, but he was a so-called Carthaginian, a North African.
But he was a tough brother.
Oh, no doubt about that.
And
That's why we're
also,
still talking about it.
I was going to ask you that the influence of the Moors with their knowledge and wisdom, does it have an effect on the Western culture and the way that they're treating people today, as far as their weaponry and sophistication?
The Moors are said to have introduced fire sticks or guns into Europe.
Okay, that's what I was
They introduced paved streets, street lights. They had some bad libraries, air conditioning. Yeah, the Moors were very sophisticated. The Moors we don't hear much about because they were black and they were Muslims.
That's right.
Yes, sir, brother.
Okay, again, getting back to the basic premise, is the white man inherently evil? First of all, we've really yet to define what is evil, but I
Good question.
want to get on the point of inheritance. Because when we talk about inheritance, we're talking about something carried inside your genes.
Yes, sir.
We do know that survival skills allow people to continue, so those skills are encoded into the DNA structure or the gene structure which comes forward in basically all species. Of course, that relates to Darwin, who we don't go with. But anyways, to get to my point, a black man, black woman growing up in the fertile part of this planet will wake up in the morning, walk out, greet the day, pour libation, gather herbs and things, and these would all be fish in the river. But the white man or white woman would have to wake up. It would be cold, and they would be hungry. And for 4 months out of the year, they'd have to go and beat something over the head to eat it, and kill it and eat it. Those became survival skills.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we do inherit survival skills through our DNA, our genetic structure, then yes, the white man has inherited something which then we may or may not be able to define as evil.
Good point.
Thank you, brother.
Very good point. Next time, I'm going to let you get a lecture and I'm going to ask the questions. All right, sister. Yes.
Okay. Being that if we want to go with science and DNA and whatnot, if we were the first original people, and we were, right?
No question, yes.
Then they came from us.
Everybody came from us.
Okay.
Let her finish her point.
Then we were responsible for something happening to allow that genetic defect to occur.
I don't think so.
No, they came from us.
Then that responsibility is still on us today, and we keep pointing outside of ourselves, and we have to look at us, because something in us allows that genetic mutation to occur.
No, that's not correct.
Now, we're not going to turn this into a debate now. Now, I'm glad everybody's into it. You can introduce yourself, exchange phone numbers, and all of that. You can give me your number, all right? But I'm saying that now this is a time where we show each other respect and we just raise brief points. Now, wait a minute, y'all. Come on now.
There's a point of responsibility that there are some of us who are here who are listening to this, and then there are those who are not, who don't feel like they have a responsibility toward our nation as a community human base. If we continue to not take responsibility and allow, I'm losing my point. What I'm saying is, we are all responsible as a human community. Those people came from us, and whatever we did at some point in time to allow this to occur, we still got to take responsibility today.
Now, wait a minute, y'all. Now, this is the key thing now. Otherwise, we just stop the program. If we cannot listen to each other patiently and with respect, we ain't going to make it. Now, get a sister a chance to make her point, whether you agree or disagree.
What I'm saying, the point is accountability and responsibility. And it's just that something that we have to, if they came from us,
Corrida de toros, películas, deporte internacional y telenovelas desde México hasta Sudamérica.
I think we understand. Yes, sir.
About inherited evil, inherited from the devil. That's what inherited is. Somebody can only do evil. People who do evil things have to be, from the devil, and to trick people. See, because they know. They're kind of smart. They can trick. They know they can do that trick.
Trickology, huh?
In other way, and while stuff's going on, or have you like killing yourself, and you don't think it, like what's happening now, indirectly, not like directly, but,
All right. Point well taken. How about somebody, my brother in the back? We'll come back to it.
The biological proclivity of the Europeans prior to development.
Little louder.
I said you look at the biological proclivity of Europeans, which they developed prior to any kind of culture development. I think that's critical in terms of their attitude, in terms of their women, like knocking a woman in the head, taking her in the cave, rape her. That was before they developed culture. See, culture is something that developed over a long period of time. Prior to them developing Western culture, they had certain proclivities, which probably had a lot to do with the Ice Age and their isolation, which I think became a biological factor, which precedes any kind of culture impingement on the way they act.
Very good point. Let me say 2 or 3 things. Now, I'm acting more or less like the moderator now. I don't pretend to be an expert, right? Just facilitator. 3 books I would recommend. First, everybody should read the ISIS Papers by Dr. Wilson. There's a new book called Yurugu by a sister named Marimba Ani, Donna Richards, and a book that I'm very, very big with, and that is The Culture Unity of Black Africa by Sheikh Anta Diop. All of those books deal with those questions.
Can you deal with America, too, and right here in Los Angeles? Because that's a serious concern of mine.
What do you mean?
Our people right here in Los Angeles dealing with the inheritance of the white man and how we've been victimized right here in Los Angeles. When you talk about the 187, 3 strikes you're out, and this nice new inherited bill that's supposed to take our babies out of orphanage or put our babies in orphanage homes, institutionalize them with some kind of he's hyper, therefore we have to inject them with needles and give them some kind of sedation. I have a problem with this type of inherited racism.
You have a problem. We all have that problem, brother.
We don't take a stand and deal with the problems and concerns that we have right here in Los Angeles.
All right.
That's one of the serious concerns that I have, and when you make the statement, what are you doing, my brother, when we talk about, I know what Arsenio's doing, I know what he's doing, but what are you doing? And what I'm saying to you is that I would love to see how you could facilitate, how we could utilize our genuine minds to help each other, help ourselves right here in Los Angeles. Because that's what we need to do in terms of survival when we deal with the white beast that's causing us to be victimized here in America. And I really think we need to concern ourselves about here.
Okay, very good.
We live here.
Very good.
We are the highest populated city in terms of population in all of the United States. And we need to concern ourselves about how we're going to reconstruct and how we're going to help ourselves in this struggle that's been victimizing us in terms of jobs and non-jobs. And these 123,000 industries that we can do some type of manufacturing work that we used to do in years past in Los Angeles to help us have a wealthier lifestyle, to help us help ourselves.
Okay, very good. Point well taken. Brother?
Yeah, I'd like to expand on what the young lady said.
Briefly.
Briefly. The universe is governed by certain laws, one of them being cause and effect. If I cause a fire, the effect will be whatever I can set fire to will burn. We must look far enough back to find what caused mutations in African people to make them. Another thing, I myself am a mixed person, which means my father is purebred white from Europe, which would mean I would carry potential for evil in me. We all carry the potential for evil within us.
No, not John. You, sir. Yes, brother. Yeah, take 5 more minutes. Are we through, Jamal?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
I gave you the information.
Yeah.
It's been a source that's available to everybody.